Hi, I'm Kim, the Executive Director of the Hoyt Center for the Arts. I'm here today with Allie DuBois, and we're going to talk about the house that Hoyt built. I've been here 24 years this October, and just when you think you know everything, you find out that you don't. We were given 3 journals by the great niece of June Hoyt, kind of chronicling the experience, the building of this house between 1914 and 1916. And we were kicking around ideas of how we would use those journals to give a different perspective of the house and what went into it when it was built. And I invited Allie into the project as the voice of June, actually.
Having an opportunity to look at the history. The journals that we have access to were dated 1914 to 1917. And so understanding sort of like the broader context of what was going on in the world, World War I, and then looking at what life looked like then, where very few people owned cars.
Yeah.
And even fewer had access to telephones or washing machines.
Yes, yeah.
And looking at it also from the different activities that they did.
Right.
Where the Victrola or a phonograph was more common because TVs didn't exist.
I think one thing we both noticed from looking at the journals was that they didn't build houses then like they did today. Not just the steel beam concrete construction, that's not what I mean, but today you put up the whole framework of the house, you get that done, then you start finishing the interiors, where back then, it was, you build one floor, you start to finish it while the next one's being floored. You had a wing over here, so to be able to afford to take that kind of approach to building a house that you don't necessarily have a budget for was quite phenomenal.
And in 1915, the average cost to build a home was about $5,000. And Kim, you said how much
we estimate that this house was about $225,000 to build. Now you have to consider that back then the value of $1 was about $25.56. So if
of today's money.
Right. Yeah. So the equivalent would be over $5 million. About 5.5, I believe it was, to build this house today. And I don't think you could, not with the quality of the craftsmanship and the artisans that you'd be unlikely to find. I know from a stewardship perspective, trying to repair and care for these houses.
When you read the journals by today's standards, you sort of take for granted the modern conveniences because they're very common for us today. But back then, having access to like a central vacuuming line was very unusual.
To have a telephone in your house.
To have a telephone.
Let alone a telephone room.
Yes. Also quite unusual. I think something like 30% of the households had access to telephones.
Right.
The same with cars. The journals reference a number of different cars. I wonder if May Emma really liked cars because Crawford and June borrow May Emma's cars quite a bit. But they had access to cars in less than I think 20% of the population at that point had
access to cars. And not only that, not only did they have multiple cars, but they had a gas fueling station in the garage. So he didn't have to go anywhere else to get fuel like we do nowadays. He could just do it right here from home. So there are many things that struck me about this house that we'd like to share. Some of it I call the domestic curiosities or amenities, if you will. The fact that this house was built with the central vacuuming, which who knew that was even available at that time, that it had the telephone room, that it has its own dryer, not just a wringer washer system, but a dryer, which we would like to share soon. It had an incinerator, it had a freight elevator, it had a dumbwaiter, it had all of these things that were above and beyond what an average house would have at that point in time.
Additionally, I think some of the architectural finishes, wainscoting from floor to ceiling, especially in this room, the Great Hall, they called it. And she actually quite detailed the wainscoting throughout the house, which I thought was interesting because it must have been pretty expensive.
Well, we hope we've piqued your interest. This is probably just the first, and who knows how many tours we'll end up doing, sharing with you the various things that we've learned, all the neat things about each room. We want to take you down to the basement, an area that no one gets to see in person, as well as a few other areas. I don't know what's on your list.
It's, well, one of the things that I can't wait to show is June's shower.
Oh, the shower.
Yes, it's referenced in
She
the
didn't want
journals.
it, yeah.
And she didn't want it, but it is.
So they did
remarkable.
not agree. They did not agree on everything.
Yeah.
The kitchen's another one. I'm not going to say why, but it grew on her.
Yes.
The shower, I'm not sure the shower grew on her.
I know, but it is kind of remarkable, and I think that you'll agree when you see how the shower is set up for 1915.
Thank you, and we'll see you next time.